At the turn of the 21st century, fans of The Price is Right received some startling news via an announcement that longtime show model Janice Pennington was no longer going to be appearing on the program. Janice had been a staple on the program for nearly 3 decades, having debuted on the series upon its 1972 premiere. Sadly, the story of Janice's removal from the series is merely the tip of the iceberg that reveals a damning history of wrongful terminations that have apparently plagued The Price is Right. Join Facts First as we explore the real reason Janice Pennington left The Price is Right. In 2000, fans of The Price is Right were shocked to learn that longtime model Janice Pennington would no longer be appearing on the classic game show. The announcement came as just as much of a surprise to the model herself. Janice had been on the show for 28 years and had filmed well over 6,000 episodes. Audiences had come to associate Janice with the program just as much as host Bob Barker himself, and many fans were outraged at her sudden departure. While Janice's departure made the biggest waves, she wasn't the only beloved member of The Price is Right's team to be let go at the time. Another one of the show's models, as well as several members of the creative staff, were also let go. The other model was Kathleen Bradley, though she hadn't been a member of the show's team for quite as long as Janice. Because of this, her departure didn't make as many waves. Though Janice Pennington wasn't the only one being booted off the program, her departure was the one that audiences had the hardest time dealing with. Angry letters came pouring in, though the powers that be were firm in their stance that there was no longer room for Janice or any of the other fired employees on The Price is Right. But no clear reason was ever given for why they were let go. Janice and Kathleen knew the real reason. In the years leading up to their firing, both Janice and Kathleen had refused to defend host Bob Barker and the show in a wrongful termination lawsuit that came about after the firing of Hallstrom. Holly had been dismissed from The Price is Right in 1995, but there was a clear reason given for her termination. Still, that wasn't determined by much of the public to be a very good one. As it turns out, she was fired from The Price is Right as the result of a minor weight gain. Of course, Holly wasn't too happy about being let go from the series for such a superficial reason and subsequently sued. When she sued Bob Barker and The Price is Right for what she felt was wrongful termination, the show's staff asked remaining models, such as Janice and Kathleen, to testify against the former game show model in court to prove there was no negativity or discrimination going on in the hiring and firing of the show's beautiful ladies, which have often been colloquially referred to as Barker's beauties. Never take the stand against a fellow model. For whatever reason, both Janice and Kathleen flat out refused to testify in the defense of Bob Barker and the show. It may have been the two models agreed with the point that their former peer was trying to make with her wrongful termination lawsuit. Janice and Kathleen may not have been able to find it in themselves to defend Bob and the show. Or they may have simply not wanted to get up on the stand and start attacking Holly, given the fact that she used to be one of them. Either way, Janice and Kathleen refused to testify, and they likely lost their jobs because of it. When they were booted off The Price is Right, there was no episode paying respects to the longtime models. There wasn't even so much as a farewell. The duties of the two models were simply passed over to remaining model Nikki Zering with little fanfare, and Nikki retained her duties for the next several years. It was likely an intentional move on the part of The Price is Right's creative team not to mention their departure, because they didn't want to stir the pot. The reaction to the models being fired had been bad enough without drawing attention to it on the show. Not long after being fired, both Janice and Kathleen joined the ranks of former peer Holly Hallstrom by suing The Price is Right for wrongful termination. Before we tell you more about it, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Janice and Kathleen settled out of court. Shortly into Janice Pennington and Kathleen Bradley's respective wrongful termination lawsuits against The Price is Right, the two former models ended up settling out of court for an undisclosed sum. Janice's settlement came complete with a hush clause that prevented her from disparaging Bob Barker, while Kathleen's settlement included no such clause. Because of this, Kathleen has been the much more outspoken of the two when it comes to her negative feelings about the situation in the wake of the settlement. Both models claimed it wasn't Bob Barker who had fired them personally, but instead the network. While Janice Pennington and Kathleen Brady were willing to settle out of court, this wasn't the case with Holly Hallstrom. It resulted in a 10-year legal battle in which the former game show model didn't let up for a second. Holly had been fired from The Price is Right in 1995. A clear reason had been given, and she was fired directly by Bob Barker. As established, the reason for Holly being fired was she'd put on a few pounds. Following her firing, Holly recounted how the show's creative team often hid her behind large objects so the audience couldn't make out her figure. When this was happening, Holly didn't think all that much about it. However, in retrospect, the star came to realize the show's staff was trying to hide her minuscule weight gain. Holly was understandably offended by the notion that she needed to be let go from the series just because she'd put on some barely noticeable weight. But there was also the fact of the matter that Holly didn't fully believe her weight gain was the real reason for her being let go. Instead, she believed the real reason was because she, like Janice Pennington and Kathleen Bradley after her, refused to testify on Bob Barker's behalf. Janice and Kathleen's story mirrored Holly Hallstrom's. Just as Janice and Kathleen would be asked to do against her many years later, Holly was asked during what would end up being her final years to testify against one of her former peers to defend her employer. She was asked to testify against a model named Diane Parkinson. Diane exited The Price is Right for undisclosed reasons in 1993 before coming out of the woodwork shortly afterwards with a sexual harassment lawsuit against Bob. When it was revealed Diane Parkinson would be suing Bob Barker for sexual harassment, Bob asked Holly to do some press events and tell the world Diane wasn't telling the truth. Not wanting to get involved, Holly refused. She thought she was in the clear until she was fired for weight gain. Of course, it's not hard to connect the dots and assume there definitely could have been an ulterior motive for Holly's firing. If this is the case, it seems Diane's sexual harassment lawsuit had a snowball effect that ended up costing The Price is Right a whole lot of money. Holly Hallstrom didn't take her removal from the show lying down, and subsequently brought about her aforementioned wrongful termination lawsuit. Bob tried to sue her for slander, claiming she was lying about him in the wake of her firing. The lawsuit was thrown out, and Bob was forced to pay Holly's legal fees. As far as her wrongful termination lawsuit, it ended up taking a whopping 10 years for Holly to get justice in the courts. The whole debacle likely could have been over much faster if Holly had taken an out-of-court settlement, but the ex-model truly wanted justice. Holly Hallstrom found justice in the courts. Holly ended up using all her money in her battle against The Price is Right, to the point where she was said to be living out of her car towards the end of it. Her perseverance ended up paying off, however, as she emerged from the legal battle as its victor in 2005, with many millions of dollars to her name as a result. Now it's time to hear from you. Which part of this story was the most shocking to hear about? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.